How dare you ruin my jacket that costs more than your life? You worthless man, the homeless man murmured an apology. But wealthy Trent wasn't done. He grabbed the man's collar, sneered, and, to the shock of the room, slapped him. This should serve as a lesson on useless man, and never to cross path with people like me. The sound cracked through the diner. The waitress froze mid-step. The manager looked away, and Eli the homeless man, frail, embarrassed, humiliated, simply closed his eyes and whispered, "God bless you, son." And what happened in the end left a haunting mark that can't be erased. The Redwood Diner sat at the edge of Route 16, a place where stories slowed down, but never stopped. It was the kind of roadside eatery that seemed to hum with the ghosts of 100 small miseries. Truckers nursing burnt coffee, lonely men pretending to read newspapers, waitresses with dreams smaller than their aprons. It was Thursday, cold, and the light outside was a weak shade of gray, like the day hadn't yet decided if it wanted to live. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of grease and rain. The old jukebox in the corner clicked but never played, and the ceiling fan turned lazily as though exhausted by its own purpose. At a booth near the window sat Trent Holloway, the man everyone in the county either envied or quietly hated. He was 34, rich by small-town standards and shallow by any other. The kind of man who measured life in possessions, suits, cars, watches, women. He sold luxury vehicles to men who couldn't afford them and convinced himself he was a visionary. His laughter filled rooms. His arrogance emptied them. Beside him sat two men from his gym, both in black jackets, both dependent on Trent's approval to feel like they existed. They were his audience. He was their mirror. The waitress, Nancy, poured coffee with her usual quiet indifference. Her eyes flicked toward the corner where a man in a worn-out coat sat alone. His name, unknown to most, was Eli Turner. He had been coming to the diner for weeks, always ordering the cheapest thing on the menu, a cup of water, sometimes a slice of bread if the waitress slipped it to him. His hands were weathered, his beard untrimmed, and his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the world. He spoke little, ate less, and prayed before drinking. He was a reminder of something uncomfortable, that life could fall apart without warning, that success could rot overnight. Most patrons pretended not to see him. Trent didn't pretend. He stared. "Guy's been sitting here for days," Trent muttered. "Same seat, same coat. You'd think the smell would register by now." His friends chuckled, glancing nervously at the waitress as if seeking her complicity. She ignored them. Eli adjusted his coat, perhaps sensing their laughter. He turned his head slightly, offering a faint, tired smile toward Nancy. When he reached for his glass, his trembling fingers tipped it. A few drops of water landed on the corner of Trent's gray jacket. Silence. The diner stilled, like air waiting to see what shape cruelty would take. Trent looked down at the drops, then slowly up at Eli. His face hardened, not with anger but with opportunity. There was pleasure in being wronged when you enjoyed punishing others for it. He rose from his seat, the leather of his shoes squeaking against the tile. "Hey!" he said sharply. Eli looked up. "I'm sorry, sir, didn't mean—" Trent cut him off with a laugh. That kind of half-chuckle rich men use to announce superiority. "You didn't mean? You just ruined a jacket that costs more than your entire life. You understand that?" Laughter again, this time from the gym buddies. Not genuine, just obedient. Eli nodded quietly, his voice almost invisible. "I'm sorry." But Trent wasn't interested in apologies. He wanted theater. He wanted witnesses. He stepped closer, towering over the man. "You think sorry fixes things?" Eli didn't respond. He simply bowed his head, hands trembling on the table. The moment stretched, brittle, humiliating. Then came the sound, sharp, precise, irreversible. A slap. It echoed through the diner like a gunshot. Nancy gasped. Someone dropped a fork. Eli's head turned from the impact, but he didn't raise his hand, didn't shout. He just sat there, still and small, as if trying to absorb the moment without letting it spill into rage. Trent adjusted his cufflinks, his expression calm, satisfied. "That's for teaching you respect," he said. He dropped a $20 bill onto the counter, a mockery of generosity, and returned to his booth. His friends exhaled, one whispering something about putting people in their place. The diner resumed its noise in fragments, the clatter of plates, the hum of the ceiling fan, the slow recovery of cowardly normalcy. But something had changed. Something unseen had cracked open. Eli sat quietly for a long time. Then, almost to himself, he whispered, "God bless you, son." The words hung there, soft, broken, and frighteningly calm. Nancy wanted to speak, to say something kind, but fear had its own gravity. The other patrons kept their eyes on their plates. No one wanted to remember what courage looked like. Outside, a cold wind rolled across the gravel lot. Somewhere in the distance came the low rumble of motorcycles. By 2:10 p.m., the diner's parking lot had filled with 3 of them, matte black machines that gleamed against the gray light. The engines cut, and 3 men stepped off. They weren't local. You could tell by the way silence followed them in. The tallest one, gray-bearded with an old leather jacket, held the door for the others. They entered quietly, without the swagger people expected from bikers. Just a slow, measured stillness that drew attention without asking for it. Nancy looked up. "Coffee?" she asked out of habit. "3," said the gray-bearded one. His voice was low, calm, deliberate. He turned his head toward Eli's table. "That him?" The question was too soft for most to hear, but Trent did. He glanced up from his booth, annoyance flashing across his face. He didn't like men who entered rooms he didn't control. Eli looked up too. Surprise flickered in his eyes. Then recognition. He gave a small, tired smile. "Didn't expect you boys to find me here." The gray-bearded man nodded once. "We find our own." He pulled up a chair beside him. The others stood, hands in pockets, scanning the room. Trent muttered something to his friends, a half-joke about charity bikers. His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look at that. Guess every bum's got a fan club now." The gray-bearded man didn't respond. He sipped his coffee slowly. Eli looked down, ashamed, but the older man's hand rested on his shoulder. Firm, steady. "Don't," the biker said quietly. "You did nothing wrong." Across the room, Trent smirked. He raised his voice again. "Hey, old man," he said. "You teaching him manners or collecting his tears?" The 2 gym buddies laughed, desperate to stay aligned with cruelty. Eli whispered, "Let it go, Reese. He's not worth it." That name, Reese, carried weight. It was said like history, not habit. Trent heard it and chuckled. "Reese, huh? Cute name. You a preacher or a parolee?" Reese looked at him for a long moment, not with anger, but with the kind of silence that makes arrogance nervous. Then he turned to Eli again and asked softly, "This the guy?" Eli hesitated, then nodded once. Trent leaned back, spreading his arms like a showman before an audience. "Oh, what now? You calling your biker gang for backup? You people really think life's a movie." The room froze. Even his friends shifted uneasily. Reese placed his cup down gently. Then he said, almost like he was narrating a memory, "You ever stop to wonder how small a man must feel before he tries to make another smaller?" Trent frowned, caught off guard by the tone. You talking to me? Yes, Reese said. I am. His eyes didn't blink. His voice didn't rise. He stood up slowly, not in threat, in revelation. You hit a man who never lifted a hand to you. You called it respect. But the only thing you taught him is that monsters can wear cologne. Trent's smirk faltered. Reese looked down at Eli. You ready? Eli nodded. They stood, and together they walked to the door. Reese stopped halfway, turned to the waitress, and said, Bill's on us for everyone here, including him. He nodded toward Trent. Then they stepped outside. Through the window, Trent and his friends watched as 15 more bikers appeared, engines idling like thunder under restraint. They formed a half circle around the diner, helmets glinting in the weak light. No one spoke. No one moved. Inside, Trent laughed nervously. What? They gonna beat me up for charity? He said, but the words sounded thin, airless. The waitress whispered, They're not here to hurt anyone. Trent turned sharply. You know them? She shook her head. No, but I know that look. They came for something you don't understand yet. The engines quieted. The silence outside pressed against the diner walls like a pulse. Inside, Trent pretended not to care. He paid his bill, tossed a 20 on the counter, and muttered, Bikers, homeless, all the same circus. But when he pushed open the door, the air outside felt heavier, too still, too aware. Reese stood near the edge of the gravel, hands in pockets. The others formed a line behind him, motionless. Eli stood slightly apart, looking at nothing. Reese said without turning, You know what I hate most about people like you, Trent? You think power is proof of worth. But the moment you met someone who doesn't need your money or fear your voice, you vanished. Trent's throat tightened. You threatening me? No, said Reese. I'm showing you the mirror. Then, as if on cue, the engines started again, all 15 of them, the sound rising like judgment itself. And for the first time that day, Trent felt what he'd never felt before. Not fear, recognition, perfect. The next day, word of the diner incident spread quietly, like smoke under a closed door. Small towns have no real secrets, only delays. By noon, people in Lansing were already whispering about Trent Holloway and the homeless man he had hit. Nobody used Eli's name. He was just the bum or that guy. But Trent's name, his name carried. Trent brushed it off, as arrogant men do. He told the story at his dealership, laughing as if he were recounting a bar fight that proved his dominance. He exaggerated it, said the man had been drunk, belligerent, aggressive. His employees laughed when he laughed. Fear does that. It trains people to mimic power. But what Trent didn't know was that someone had recorded the scene. A woman sitting by the window, an older lady with a silver phone, had caught it all. The slap, the silence, Eli's broken words, the 20 tossed like insult. The clip made its way online. A short video, 32 seconds, titled simply, Man Slaps Homeless Poor Man in Diner. The views multiplied overnight. The comments poured in, some furious, some performative, all damning. The internet had no mercy, but Trent didn't yet know it was aimed at him. He slept soundly, the kind of sleep that only ignorance allows. Eli didn't sleep. He sat beneath an overpass, the rain whispering against the concrete, listening to the thunder of trucks passing above. The pain wasn't in his cheek. It was deeper. It was the realization that dignity can be taken in public, and most people will simply look away. He wasn't angry. He was tired of being invisible until someone needed a spectacle. But there was something new stirring under that exhaustion. A quiet clarity. When Reese approached, Eli didn't look up. You shouldn't have followed me, Eli said softly. Reese sat beside him on the cold curb. We didn't follow you. We watched. Eli sighed. I told you I don't want trouble. You think it's about trouble? Reese said. No, it's about memory. Eli frowned, confused. Reese continued. You remember 20 years ago? Your shop, Turner Motors. You built custom engines for people who couldn't afford dealership nonsense. That's where I met you. You hired me, fed me, treated me like a man when I wasn't worth the oil on my hands. Then your business burned down. I thought it was an accident. Eli closed his eyes. It wasn't. Reese's voice hardened. Your old partner, Harold Holloway, Trent's father. Eli nodded. He took everything, patent, design, insurance, left me with the debt and the blame. My wife couldn't handle it. The stress. She died 3 years later. Reese said nothing. There was nothing to say. The silence itself was an indictment. You never told anyone, Reese said finally. Would it have mattered? Eli replied. In this town, money talks. Men like me, we whisper, then we disappear. Reese looked at him, eyes narrowing. No, Eli, not this time. By the following week, Trent's life began to unravel in subtle ways, the kind of unraveling that doesn't come from explosions, but from slow, deliberate exposure. Customers stopped coming. His employees grew quiet. A few quit, claiming they were pursuing better opportunities, but really they couldn't stand the stares. The video had reached the local news. Trent's face was now the face of humiliation. He tried to deny it at first, claiming deep fakes, editing tricks, slander. But the truth had a rhythm that couldn't be faked. The pause before the slap, the laughter after, the stillness of guilt in everyone around him. The world saw arrogance in its purest form, and it recoiled. By Friday, his business partner pulled out of an upcoming expansion. Sponsors withdrew. He was asked to take a leave of absence from the town's Rotary Club, which in small-town terms meant exile. Trent blamed everyone, his employees, the woman with the phone, even Eli, especially Eli. He drove by the diner one afternoon, the same parking lot where his triumph had turned into infamy. The place looked smaller now, somehow shamed by its own participation. The waitress, Nancy, refused to meet his eyes through the window. And parked near the far end of the lot, lined like sentinels, were motorcycles. Not just a few, dozens. Engines off, men standing beside them, silent. Trent froze in his car, the engine humming weakly. They didn't move, they didn't threaten. They just were. Presence, not violence, judgment without words. He rolled his window up, locked his doors, and sped away. That night, the dealership was vandalized. Not destroyed, just altered. The windows were untouched, but the walls were covered in writing, thick black paint, slow, deliberate strokes. Power isn't proof. He built what you stole. We remember. No one saw who did it. No cameras, no witnesses, just the cold handwriting of consequence. Trent called the police, but they treated it like a prank. When the officer asked, "You make anyone angry lately?" Trent had no answer that wouldn't sound like confession. Reese's group wasn't a gang. It was a brotherhood of men who had once lived invisible lives, veterans, outcasts, factory workers discarded by the system that worshipped men like Trent's father. They didn't fight with fists. They fought with truth. By the end of the month, a local paper published an investigative piece, The Holloway Legacy, the Untold Theft Behind Lansing's Wealth. It detailed everything: the patent stolen from Eli, the insurance fraud, the silent bankruptcy of Turner Motors, documents, testimonies, records. The author's name was unimportant. What mattered was the timing. It landed exactly 3 days after Trent's dealership filed for bankruptcy. In interviews, Trent called it a smear campaign by jealous competitors. But in private, he knew. The tone of the article was too precise, the evidence too clean. Someone had been digging in the dark, someone who knew where the bones were buried. He suspected Reese but had no proof. He suspected Eli but didn't have the courage to face him. Late one night, unable to sleep, Trent drove to the diner again. It was empty except for Nancy, cleaning counters. He walked in quietly. She didn't greet him, didn't smile, just said, "We're closed." "I'm not here for food," he said. His voice was different now, hoarse, smaller. "Where is he?" "Who?" "The old man. Eli." Nancy sighed. "Don't know. He doesn't come around anymore. Said he was leaving town." Trent hesitated, then nodded. "If he comes back, tell him—" He stopped. "Tell him I—" But the words wouldn't come. Apologies require a kind of humility that men like him have to be forced into. He turned to leave, but Nancy's voice stopped him. "You ever think maybe that slap wasn't about him?" Trent turned. "What?" She wiped her hands on a cloth. "You've been slapping people your whole life, just not always with your hands." Her words landed harder than anything Reese had said. That night, when Trent reached his home, the porch light was out. On his doorstep was a small folded note. Inside it, one sentence written in firm, neat handwriting. "The man you hit built the engine that made your first million." There was no signature, no threat, just truth. He sat on the steps until dawn, staring at that line, realizing for the first time that his entire life, his wealth, his identity, his arrogance, had been built on another man's ruin. But guilt did not bring redemption. It only brought stillness. And stillness in men like him turns to madness. A week later, his dealership was sold off at auction. The townspeople whispered, some mocking, some pitying. The video that had started it all began to fade from the internet's memory, replaced by newer scandals. But in Lansing, people remembered. The diner remained, and so did the silence that followed every cruel laugh in that place. Eli never returned. Some said he moved south. Others said he died in the cold somewhere near the old factory ruins. Reese never confirmed either. He only said, "The man found peace. That's more than most can say." Trent, on the other hand, lived, if you could call it that. He moved to a smaller town, changed his phone number, stopped using social media. But anonymity is not forgiveness. It's just quieter punishment. He saw the note every night before he slept. He read it every morning when he woke. And sometimes, when passing a diner window or hearing the sound of a motorcycle, his body froze. Not in fear, but in recognition. He would never admit it aloud, but some nights, he could still hear that sentence in his mind. "The man you hit built the engine that made your first million." And that was the twist of his story, the cruel symmetry. Eli was right. Every man meets the mirror that refuses to lie. Some face it with peace. Others break it trying to look away. Trent Holloway lived many more years. He never regained his fortune, but that wasn't his punishment. His punishment was survival. Waking each day to a world that remembered the worst version of him, even when it had forgotten his name. He became a rumor, then a cautionary tale, then nothing at all. But every now and then, someone new in town would ask about the writing that once covered the walls of an abandoned dealership. Power isn't proof. And the old-timers would shake their heads and say, "Ask about the man who slapped a homeless guy once. They say the echo never stopped." What did you feel while watching this story? In a world where arrogance often goes unchecked, do you believe people like Trent ever truly change? Have you ever seen someone get humbled by life like Trent did? What lesson did this story leave with you? Tell me your thoughts below. Do you believe karma waits or watches? If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe to Hidden Tales Stories, and turn on the notification bell, because we tell stories that don't just entertain, They expose truth, pride, and the quiet revenge of life itself. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that every act of cruelty leaves an echo, and that echo always finds its way back.